Hello there, I'm Tabletop Toby. Today we're going to be talking about Shackleton Base. So this is a worker placement resource management game where you are building a base in Shackleton Crater, which is a real crater, the south pole of the moon, named after Shackleton, Ernest Shackleton, who was an explorer of Antarctica. And so the crater was named after him. And the board is literally a crater on the moon. And you're building in different sectors there. And you are each a head of a space agency. But, we're having funding issues and we've had to get some corporate sponsorship. In each game, there's 7 corporations available in the game. In each game, you randomize. I guess you could choose to, it's your game. But there's 3 corporations that are sponsoring, and each of them has their own objectives. So that's part of the game. So you're trying to build your bases and get your work done, but then you're trying to get them happy and get points through that as well. So that's kind of the main aspect of the game. But of course, in the end, you're trying to get points to win, right? So without further ado, let's launch into it. All right, so here we are on Shackleton Base. This is the Shackleton crater on the south side of the moon. That's this big crater you see on the board here. And this is not going to be a detailed rules overview. I'm just going to give you an overview of how the game works. It's going to be a detailed overview. I want to give you an idea of how the game plays and whether it's a game that you like. So I'm going to go through that, and then I'm going to move into my thoughts about the game, kind of a big level overview before I go into the wormholes of all the different things going on. Is this main board is where you're going to be building your base pieces in these little sectors. Each of these is a little sector, not the middle section. The middle section is not a sector. When you build those, they're available for astronauts to be placed in them, which can give you income. They can give you more efficiencies in doing other things, or they can give you scoring bonuses at the end of the game, or reputation income, all kinds of different things. The more buildings that you build, the more maintenance costs you have at the end of the round. So you have to make sure that you have enough money to pay those, or you will have to pay also in reputation. But that can be a game you kind of play. You can kind of build up your reputation, and then it can go down. Or if you have money to cover the costs, you can pay it in money as well. And one of the efficiencies you can get is a discount on your maintenance cost. So that's kind of the building aspect of the game in short. This board is also where you do all kinds of worker placement things. You can place workers around the perimeter. When you do, you have to activate all sections where there are buildings. If you have a building in the sector, you get whatever the benefit is for free, which depends on the type of astronaut. We'll talk about that in a minute. If you don't have a building in it, whoever has the largest building in that sector, you have to pay whatever the amount is on the spot you placed on the outside of the board. So it ranges from 1 to 3. In this case, it's 1. So if I were the pink player, I would get this for free, but I would have to pay this player 1 to get that. And you have to do all of the sectors in that row. If you cannot afford to pay, then you cannot place there. So that's the worker placement on this. And it's kind of cool because it's color-coded. If you're placing a yellow astronaut, you're mining. So in this case, you get titanium, rare earth, titanium. And that's kind of the thematic use of the yellow astronauts. They're kind of the mining astronauts, the building mining astronauts, the materials. If you place a red astronaut, you just get money from each one. You would get 3 credits from each sector. And there's kind of a handy-dandy little cheat sheet here. There's actually a lot of little cheat sheets on the board, which is kind of appreciated. So if this were a red astronaut for the pink player, they would get 3, 6, 9, but they would have to pay 1 then away to this player. So they would get 8 because they would have to pay 1 of the 9 to this player. And that's kind of the function of the red astronauts. They're kind of into financing, funding. They fund projects from the corporations. Oh, we need an extra one there. There should always be 2 visible. And that's kind of their function. So that's why they're getting money when they place on this board. Blue astronauts are kind of the corporation. They are interfacing with the corporation and activating corporation actions. That's kind of their function. So if you place a blue one here, they get to activate, once again color coding, one of the blue corporation tokens on each of the adjacent ones. Now they can only activate each one once, even if it touches two different places. And for each corporation, there's kind of a lovely little separate little rule sheet for each corporation. There's 7, as I had mentioned. And for this one, it's just you get one of these robots. For the Artemis tours, you get to take one of the astronauts. And for the Skywatch, if one of these were on the board, well, actually the one's there. So if you were activating a sector with it in that and you chose to activate that token, then you would be moving along this track forward, as the little arrow next to the satellite means. And we'll talk about these obviously more in here in a little bit. But that's kind of the worker placement game here, is activating sectors where there are buildings. And all of those actions are called exploit the crater, because you're using resources, gaining resources from the crater. The other type of actions available are the command actions. And this is where you build your buildings. You place in the leftmost, and you can actually place any worker. So you'll see there's a yellow, red, and blue. If you use the matching worker, you get a bonus at the end of your turn for doing that, but you can actually place any worker. You can see there's a red worker up in this row, so when that player took that turn, they didn't get the bonus. So you can place anyone, but you do get a bonus. Whereas for the worker placement in the crater, whatever worker you use, that's what you get. You can't say, I want money and I'm placing the yellow one. If you place a yellow one, you're mining, because that's all they can do in the crater. Versus these actions, you can use any one, you just get a bonus for the matching one. So that's something that's a little different between these two areas. And you'll see the first one for all of these is free, and then it costs 1 credit, 2 credits, 3 credits, 4 credits. So it gets more expensive later in the round. So you might want to jump in there earlier. One of these efficiencies that you can get is lower cost for using these command actions. So if you're relying on these a lot, you can build this building and populate it with yellow astronauts and be more efficient with the use of the command actions. So for the build one, you're just placing there. If it's one of the ones that requires a credit, pay that. You pay whatever the cost of the building. So for the 1 space buildings, it's a titanium. For the 2 ones, it's 2 titaniums. For the 3, it's 3 titanium, a rare earth, and then there has to at least be 1 energy to spend. And so this is a collective resource. It's like there's 1 energy resource for the whole crater that we all share. And then and there's names for all of these, which I should know, but I'm very bad at remembering all the individual things because I play so many games. That's the problem. So these are domes. These are workshops. They give you the efficiencies. These are laboratories, and this is headquarters. So that makes sense. So for your headquarters, it's 4 titanium, a rare earth, and then you deplete 2 energy. When it goes online, it's like sucking that energy out because it's very large. And for those, you have to place in a powered sector. So you see there's these little solar panels. So you can place in any sector that's available. You see there's a 1 spot, 2 spot, and 3 spot in each of these. So if there's one available, you can just place it in one of the available ones. And there could be motivations to place them in different places. But if there's not one available, or maybe you just want to, you have to build a solar panel. And that's what this little friend here means, is that at any time, once per turn, you can spend a rare earth to build a solar panel. When you do, you take the next one available, starting up here and going in sequence around, and you put it wherever you want to build. You increase the energy. Now you'll see it's at the top of the board. So actually we cannot build a solar panel, which is where this is right now. It would have to be further down here. And it goes up. If it moves into or across anything with these reputation symbols, you move up that many reputation because you're contributing to the good of the community by providing power to us all, which I love thematically. And then now you can build in that sector because it's powered. So you would take your building that you had paid the resources for and then place it on the board there. Now, you cannot freely move around your astronauts, which is kind of an interesting part of the puzzle of this game. You can only move them at certain times. One of the times you can move them is when you build a building. At that time, you can move astronauts into your new building. So maybe we wouldn't have wanted to build that one. Maybe we would have wanted to build this one because now we want to keep these yellow ones in here because they give the maintenance discount. I talked about how there's different efficiencies in here if you match the yellow ones. We want to get this red one here because it provides bonus points at the end of the game. So maybe that's an opportunity for us to move it down. And then if we did use a yellow astronaut, we can activate a corporate token. We get to choose one. If we choose one that it's already there, we just get it. So if we wanted to do the robot in this case, we would just get a robot. If we want one of the other ones, then we would take one. If we want an astronaut or the satellite, we would take it and put it and then activate it. Now, in this case, there's no other slots there, so that's not an option. But if it were one of these that had multiple slots, like if we had built here and there's a satellite and astronaut, but we actually wanted a robot, we could grab one of those. And which one you chooses has an impact on funding projects, which we're going to touch on right now. So that next row, you get a bonus if you use a red astronaut to place, and it's the same thing. You start from the left, and it's the same cost increase over time. When you place there, you get to fund one of the projects from the corporation. Now, these all kind of relate to the corporation boards. And we're going to dive into each of these. There's 7 of them. We will discuss these 3 in a little bit more detail, not a ton, and then we'll go through the other 4 really quickly. These projects give you in-game scoring, which is at the bottom. So that could be a factor you choose. Like there's a 5 one, which is great. It's on the higher end. You see 2, 3, 4 there. They can give you an immediate benefit. So if there's anything in the upper left-hand corner, it gives you immediate benefit. This allows you to, for free, not having to pay these resources. You usually have to pay to place one of those markers. These both give you a robot for free. And then they often give you an ongoing benefit that relates to that corporation. It can make you more efficient at the specific kind of subsidiary game that this corporation involves. It sometimes allows you to use the resources that you get related to the corporation for other things, maybe building or part of the main game. Sometimes it allows you to do that. Sometimes it allows you to take actions kind of outside the main normal part of the game. Like normally you have to go here to fund a project, but on this board as a corporate action, which is here or it's other places, it's kind of a workaround. If you throw a robot away, you can actually fund a project here instead. So it's a way to take the action in a different way. So there's no way we can cover all those cards, but just know that they relate to these corporations. So if you're going deep into one of these corporations, then it's going to play well with you doing that. In my experience of playing it, you're going to probably be able to go pretty deep into 2 of them and maybe lighter into 1. It's a tight game, so it's kind of hard to do it all, even though you want to do it all. But that's what these projects do. Now, we talked about placing these corporation tokens. Now, you'll see at the top here, these are the costs of the funding these projects. The default for all of them is 4 credits. You have to at least have 4 energy, and then it's going to go down 1 energy to fund the project because, you're building whatever it is or doing whatever, and that's what it takes. But for every token that's gone, that increases the cost. So now up here, because there's 2 gone, it's now going to cost 6 credits, and there has to at least be 5 energy, and now it's going to deplete 2 energy to do this. So there's kind of a catch-22. You might want more of these tokens out because you're going deep into this, but the more of them that you put out, it's going to be more expensive for you to get these cards. So you might want to get the cards earlier before you get the tokens out, but then your opponents might see that you're going deep into that. So maybe they'll get those tokens out to make it more expensive for you to get those cards. So there's definitely a benefit to watching what your opponents are doing, and there's definitely a highly interactive aspect to this game. And I would say that's definitely something that some people may not care for. This is not a solitaire game. There is definitely kind of a area control aspect of the game that we'll talk about at the round end in particular. And that's kind of part of it too. Your choice in which of these you play can impact yourself and which corporations you're going into, but you could also be like, oh, I think they're saving up to invest in one of those projects. I'm going to make it more expensive, and now they're going to have to waste their turn to get more money. So, yeah. If you don't like that interactivity, if you don't appreciate that, blocking and getting in each other's ways a little bit, then that might mean this might not be something you want to like. But it's also such a tight game that, some of that's just going to happen anyway. They may not be purposely doing that. They may also just want an astronaut right now in that corporate token, and maybe they're not purposely doing that, and it's an accidental blocking. I think that is also something that's just going to happen in this game. You're just going to get in each other's way because it is so tight. However, you can also purposely get in each other's way if you really want to. And I think if you're super competitive, then that's definitely something that's possible in this game. And I don't necessarily mind that. Going in knowing that the game is set up for that possibility, I'm kind of here for it. And I think thematically it fits as well because, it's the corporations and you're fighting for their attention and to prove yourself and get their, funding. And so I'm fine with it, definitely in this context. Some games, that line pushes a little too far for me, but for here, it feels appropriate and it, I think, falls in line with me, but it's just something to be aware of if you're thinking about this game. So if you take that funding action, you have to have that energy level, you pay the resource, you deplete the energy. If you don't have enough energy, if it's below 3, you can pay credits to get the energy up. Otherwise, if you are taking command action, you can do that rare earth to build a solar panel. Otherwise, if there's not enough energy, you can't do that particular one. You could do a different one, or you're going to have to do something to get energy back or wait till someone else gets the energy back to be able to do that. If you do play the matching red worker, your bonus is that you get to take a corporate action, and it can be any corporate action. It doesn't have to be the one that you just funded. Now, what are corporate actions? You say, well, that thankfully is the next action, so we can go right into that. So the corporate actions, so these are different than the corporate tokens. We talked about the corporate tokens, and those are always very straightforward things. They're usually getting a resource, very simple kind of thing. And they're all different depending on the corporation. Now there's corporate actions for each corporation, and there's corporate actions on this reputation track. For simplicity, I'm going to talk about the corporate actions on the reputation track first because they're always here. So as you move up this corporation track, as you hit each of these levels of the corporation actions available with the symbol there, you can then do any of those and the ones below. When you're taking this action, if you are taking any corporation actions on the reputation track, you can only do each one once. So that's important to know. So this one is you can actually increase your reputation twice. If you hit one of the actions above it, you can then take that one as another action. This is just gain a titanium. This is gain a rare earth. Very handy, I have found. This is take a corporate token action of your choice. And then the corporate actions for the corporations are always different. And there's a special one for each corporation. So we're going to talk about those in the context of talking about each of these corporations. So you would take 3 corporate actions, and then if you do use a blue worker here, your bonus action is you get to, this is what this symbol means, the multicolored person, you get to take one of these astronauts from the gateway, the Lunar gateway, I think it's called, any one of your choice, and you get to put it into an open slot in your base. So we've talked about the exploit the crater with 3 different workers. We've talked about these command actions, and that's these first 2. These are the options you can do with your workers that you get. And foreshadowing, we'll talk about how you get your workers in just a second. The other thing you can do is this Lunar Gateway. This is kind of a catch-all. This is often a, I don't know what to do, or I don't have enough resources to build or do something else. So I will do this instead. But it's actually not a bad action. You take one of your workers and you put it here. You get 3 credits. You get to take a different worker, physically different. It can be the same color. It just literally cannot be the worker that you placed there. And you get to put it into a space on your base. Now, if there's not a space there, you can't place it there. This little spot in the upper left-hand corner is kind of an overfill base. If all of your spaces are full, you place it there. And then when a building is built, you can move it into an open spot. So you get 3 credits. You get to take an astronaut from the lunar base, different than the one that you placed. And then you get to take a corporate action, just one. So that's the Lunar Gateway. So those are all the worker placements. Now you get 6 workers per round, and there's 3 rounds. Now, how do you get these workers? Well, it's a fun little game that happens each time. There are these shuttles. There's round 1 shuttles, round 2 shuttles, round 3 shuttles. You shuffle these and you deal out the number of players plus 1. And then starting in reverse turn order, the last player in turn order chooses 1, and they have numbers on them. The number at the top is the turn order. Then there's resources that you get at the beginning of the turn. So it could be titanium, money, rare earth, and then it determines which workers you get. So there's a different setup for each one. So this one has rare earth 7 credits, titanium, rare earth 8 credits, titanium, and then you see the makeup of workers is slightly different. So depending on what your plan is, then it may depend on what you want to pick. And that also affects turn order. So if you really want to go first for some reason and that's a priority, then you can choose a lower number. But if you're the last player to choose, then maybe you won't have a choice. And then whatever the shuttle is that's left over, those 6 astronauts go into this Lunar Gateway. And the only cap there is there can only be 4 of each astronaut in the Lunar Gateway, and then the excess is discarded. And that's how you are given your 6 workers at the beginning of each round. Now, before we get into these corporations and talk about those a little bit, because that's kind of the variability of the game, let's just talk about how the round ends, because that's something that's also, I think, pretty interesting about this game, and kind of gets into that little bit of competitive aspect of the game as well. Once again, we have this handy-dandy little sheet. So the first thing that happens is there's any corporation cleanup. In this case, there's a special cleanup option for the Artemis tours. There's none for the others, but we'll talk about Artemis tours in a minute. After any special cleanup for any of the corporations, though, you go around and you take any astronauts that were placed out in the actual crater. And where that worker is facing, whoever has the largest size in total in that row gets to take that worker. And that's where it can be competitive, because you could place a worker, and at the time you place the worker, because you're probably going to place in a row where you have a lot of things because you don't want to pay the cost to other people for placing there, someone else could build something and then take control of that row. And then now they're going to get that worker at the end of that round. And so they could kind of steal that worker from you. Now, it was never really your worker. It's like a worker for all of us. I don't know. But yeah, they're stealing the worker. But in this case, so pink is clearly the winner because it's size of 2. This brown only has 1. And so pink would get this worker, and then we continue around. And here, so green has 2. Now, this is interesting. If we hadn't built this in our little kind of playthrough, green would have it. But because we built this afterwards, now green maybe thought it had it, but then now pink does. So that would be a case where maybe green placed that worker. I think green did place that worker, but now pink has taken it. But if we hadn't done that in this, then green would have gotten it. So that's kind of how the end of the round works with that. So once again, that can be a little bit competitive. There can be a little bit of posturing there to get those workers, because you want to populate them because they give you points, they give you efficiencies, they give you income. So it's important to get them in. And it can be a little hard to get the astronauts. So you're trying to recruit them, you pull them in. And then after that, the income happens, which is this top row. And then there can be things from the corporations. In this case, particularly with the robot. In this case, this pink player has this factory that gives 3 income. And the corporate income happens first, so they would get the $3. And then maintenance happens, and this is where I mentioned, so this shows you the maintenance cost, this wrench. So each dome is 1, each workshop, the 2 slot ones are 2, the laboratories are 3, and then the headquarters are 4. So you do that, you subtract if you have this discount here, and then you have to pony up your credits if you have them, and if you don't, then you go down this reputation track, and if you're at the bottom, every time that you would lose a reputation and you don't have any, it's -2 points. Now you cannot go below 0 points, so that's good, I guess. No negative points. And then all of these workers are cleared out from the command items, and the shuttles for the next round arrive. You do that 3 rounds, and then you're going to score wherever you're on the track. You're going to get these bonus scoring for the matching workers if you have them, the yellow, red, and blue, depending on if you have 1, 2, or 3 here. You're going to get your bonus points for the projects you funded here. There may be bonus scoring for particular corporations. There are goals that you can achieve. You can only achieve 1 per corporations, but those are actually scored in the middle of the game, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the corporations in just a minute. So those are not at the end of the game, those are during the game. And then you also get points based on where you are on the reputation track. You just get a straight conversion. If you're at 6, you get 6 more victory points. So not a ton of surprises at the end. You're going to kind of see if people have astronauts here. You're going to see where people are on the reputation track. It's not going to be on the actual points, though, so you're going to have to math it out in your head. So we've avoided it long enough. Let's dive into these corporations, which is really one of the coolest part of the game because they change every time. Theoretically, you're supposed to randomize these each time. There's 7 of them. For this one, we have Artemis Tours. When you activate the corporation tokens, you put an astronaut into your board. Now, if you don't have any of the funding cards, at the end of the round, all astronauts are called as part of this initial cleanup phase. And so the first thing that would happen is that both of these would go in. And then whatever level, right now there's only 2, so each of these players would get 3 points right at that moment when they're recalled. And that's what this says right here. Now, if a third one were out, all 3 of them are now only worth 2. So the more tourists that they're out, it's not as interesting, you know? More people have seen it. It's not as special. Whereas if there's only 2 out, it's very special to those people, I guess. I'm not sure what the theming is there. But now this person's going to get 4 points. This one's only going to get 2. Versus if there's only 2, each one's getting 3. So it can change, but if it's down to this 1 point, like if there's 4 players, this could happen more likely, then they would all only be worth 1 point. So it kind of throttles. And that's kind of the main mechanic. However, it kind of really changes when you start funding these. Because some of these, now this one doesn't, this one gives you an extra action to call out more astronauts, but a lot of them have these slots on them. So you would fund these and you put this in front of you. And then as a corporate action, the special corporate action for Artemis Tours is that you can take any astronauts on your base and you can move them over here. You'll get a bonus. So for this one, when I place an astronaut here, I get 1 reputation. And so you're going to get those bonuses. And then you see this one has 1 victory point, 2 victory points, 3 victory points. You have to do them in order. You have to do this one in order too. And there's all kinds of wacky additional actions and things you can do. This one has ongoing, when you place an astronaut on a card, you gain a reputation. So when you're placing on here, you're getting a victory point and a reputation, which is kind of crazy. That's actually a super powerful card. So that adds another layer to it. You're putting them on your board when you activate corporation tokens from Artemis Tours, but then you're placing them onto these funding projects and getting these additional bonuses. Now, the goals for Artemis Tours, at the end of your turn, if you have 2 Artemis tourists on one of your cards, you can claim this and get 4 points. You'll see on the bottom here, some of these secondary second place are only available if there's 3 or more players. This is 4 players. This is 3 or more players. So there's only 2 players like we have. It's only the top spaces. This second level is 3 or more. Now this next one is 4, so you might have to have 2 of these cards and have 4 astronauts out, and then you can get 12 points. Now it also connects with this reputation track because these spots mean at the time that you complete that goal, because when you complete the goal, it immediately scores on the board. You would get a bonus point, 2 bonus points, 3 bonus points, 4 bonus points on top of whatever that is. So that's where this reputation track can matter also. So this one's fairly straightforward, but there's lots of shenanigans and weirdness with the extra things on these cards. And next we have Skywatch. And so for this one, there's an asteroid coming and it's going to hit part of the crater. And we don't know which part. There's these 6, I believe, different tiles, and you draw one at random, and we don't get to see it. It goes here in the middle, and you have to move along this track, and that's what you do with the corporation token action. And you spend resources as the corporation action. Spend the resources, you place the tokens here, take a separate action for each one, of course. And wherever you are on this track, then you get those rewards for that. If you're in this first fourth section, you can only do ones here. If you're in this second quadrant, you can do those or below. And if you're in this third quadrant, you can do those and below. When this first section is completed, then you get to turn this tile over and reveal where it's actually going to hit. There's a center section and then a circle around it that will be destroyed if it's hit. If the second section is completed, all of the top segments, then that ring around it will not be destroyed, just the center section. And if this third one is complete, then that center section will be saved as well. The asteroid will be completely destroyed. I guess in that center one, when it's completed, there was a laser fired or something and it was like mostly destroyed. So this section right here is most in danger. So it's kind of interesting as part of the game, because as it goes along, once it's revealed, like you may invest some here, but then once you actually reveal the tile, let's go ahead and reveal it, because I think most of the times it's going to be revealed, you may say, oh, well, I'm not going to build there. Like here, this is revealed, and you'll say, oh, well, green's in danger. Green can take over and invest those resources, because when you're spending resources over here, you're not able to spend them and actually build and do other things over here, which allows you to then take the exploit crater actions and get resources and mine and money or whatever you can do over here. So, I'll let green take care of it. They can deal with it. Now, it may be a good trade-off for green because there's actually a lot of points over here. And so maybe green will just be like, all right, I guess I'm the Skywatch person. I'm going to invest over here. So like all things in this game, there's kind of a trade-off, and I kind of like that, but it's dynamic, and you'll just have to see each game how that kind of plays out, and there's the randomness with it. And so I like that. It's thematic and fun. And the goals here are pretty straightforward. It's just however far you are on the track, the A, B, and C. If you've passed that at the end of the turn, then you can claim that goal. Of course, adding on any points based on where you are on the reputation track. So that's very straightforward. And then just what happens at the end of the game. If this is complete, then that ring section won't be destroyed. If this is complete, then there's no buildings destroyed at all. And what happens is, for buildings that are destroyed, those are removed from the board. You add up the size of the unit. So like if this middle section is destroyed, it'd be 1, 2 for pink, 1 for green. And then wherever you are on the track, these points here are the negative points that you get deducted from your score. So let's just say, I think most of the time these players will be further along. But if it happened right now, pink is very low. So it'd be 6 points. So it'd be 12 points negative. Green would be 5. But if pink were up here, it would only be minus 2 points if it weren't completed, but this sector were destroyed, whereas green would be minus 5 points. And this last corporation that we have out in this game is Space Robotics. This mostly just gives you more efficiencies. So we saw the corporation token action is just getting these robots, and then the corporation action is spending resources to add a factory, attach a factory to your robot. So for this top row, it's spinning a titanium, and these are ongoing benefits when you take a specific action. So this one is a reputation point every time you build. This one is 2 credits every time you build a solar panel. And that's that top row. The middle one is for a rare Earth element. When you initially do it, you get a benefit. Here it's 2 reputation. Here it's you get to take an astronaut from the Lunar Gateway. But then ongoing at the end of each round, these are also income that you are getting as well. And then the last level, which is a titanium and 5 credits, these are in-game scoring. This is for how many factories you have attached to robots, 2 points per each of those, up to 12 points. This is 2 points per funded project of any, doesn't have to be from this corporation. And then this is 2 points per structure that's 3 units big or more. And the goals here are fairly straightforward. It's 2 robots with a factory attached, 3 robots with a factory attached, or 4 robots with a factory attached. And then let's just really quickly go through the other 4 corporations just so you can kind of see some of the variety that's available, because I think that's a really cool part of this game is that, every game is going to be a little different in terms of you have a ton of options, find different paths just in the basic structure of the game in terms of different choices that you're making about how you build out your base, where you're building, how you're doing those things. But then because the corporations are changing and then the cards that are out are changing, there's just so much variety here. And I think that is really cool. So you have a game like SETI where the variability is in the cards that you're getting. Here it's kind of in the structure of how the game's set up. And there's part of it is the cards that you're getting, but you're not going to get as many cards. But I appreciate in the structure of the game itself, plus the variability of the corporations and those paths in a fairly straightforward teach, you're going to have a lot of options. I feel like this is going to have maybe a more straightforward teach than SETI. I find it hard not to compare it to SETI. I don't know why, maybe because I have played SETI and taught SETI more recently. And it also has kind of the variability of the aliens coming in the middle. Here, the variability is at the beginning, so it's going to be part of the teach at the beginning, and it's going to be part of the strategies that you consider at the beginning. But I kind of find that thrilling that the game feels the same from play to play, but yet there's these little twists, but they feel integrated. I feel like they did a good job of making it feel like they are part of the structure of the game, but they add these little twists and turns at the edges, and I think that's a nice fun trick that they've done. So with that said, let's take a quick little tour of the other 4 corporations so you can kind of see what they're like. And then we'll come back here for some final thoughts on Shackleton Base. All right, so this is moon mining. This one's fairly straightforward. The corporate token is just gathering a helium-3. And the whole concept with this is that you're mining helium-3 and then the rare earth, which is one of the basic resources that are already out with the titanium in the crater. And then you spend, as the corporate action, the helium-3 and the rare earth, and you deliver it to get these resources, and it's covered for the remainder of that round, so no one else can take that same action. And then those are cleared out at the end of the round to get either victory point, credit, reputation, and then for these most expensive ones, you can actually fund a project without spending the normal cost of those. Or you can get a solar panel and a dome without also spending the cost of those. And the goals, the first 2 are related to building a building in a sector next to a moon mining corporate token. And then the last one is having funded 3 projects from moon mining. So just spending a lot of cash in moon mining. Next up is selenium research. The corporate tokens are just gathering these different resources that you use to research. With the corporate action, you're spending the resources to gain these research projects, which have different things. This one is building a dome for free. This one is getting another one of these resources, but then getting ongoing income of 3 credits, which is pretty amazing. This one is getting 2 rare earths. These only refill at the end of your turn, so you can do multiple of these, but you don't get to then see the new ones. You just have the options that are there at the beginning of your turn. These refill at the end of the entire round, so there are round 1 research projects, round 2 research projects that are different. So the round 2 ones, you have options like building a workshop for free, or building a solar panel and a dome for free, building a solar panel, getting 2 victory points, getting to take an astronaut from the Lunar Gateway. And then round 3, you're getting into in-game victory points. So kind of escalating with the trajectory of the game. And the goals for these are just based on the number of research projects you've completed, 2, 4, and 6. Next, we have Evergreen Farms. This one says that we're trying to put plants out into the crater and make all these magical greenery and all this, but what it actually does is it increases the intensity of the area control game of the crater. So I had talked about how there is, at the end of the round, based on who has the area control, that's who gets the astronauts that are placed out for the exploit the crater action. And so this actually increases this even more. So for the corporation token action, you're getting these plant tokens as a new resource. And then as the corporate action, you can spend those to add these to a sector where you already have a building. You have to already have a building in a sector, and you add these to that. And then as a part of that recalling of the astronaut, whoever recalls an astronaut, whoever has that building majority of that sector when that astronaut is recalled, gets any bonuses of these buildings that are in that line. So that's 1 victory point, 1 reputation, and 2 victory points along with that astronaut. So it kind of increases the competition for the majorities in those lines and makes that even more of a game. And then the goals here are, at the end of your turn, you want to have majority where there are 4 units. So this is 3, 2, 1, these added together in whatever combination, 5 and 7. Just at the end of your turn, any given turn, if you have a majority in any given row where there are that many of these added together, then you can claim one of these rewards. Oh, I was putting this away and I forgot something important. I noticed on here, when you build one of these buildings in the sector where you have a building already, you do get to mine whatever resources at the center of that sector. Very important, because even if you don't win the majority of that row, you are getting an immediate benefit for building that building. So not to be forgotten. And then the last one is To Mars. This is probably the most complicated one in terms of it involves the most trade-offs from the main board and the most risk in terms of it not paying off, I believe. So you need to make sure that it's going to pay off. So basically the idea is that we're preparing a ship to launch to go to Mars. The corporate token action is getting a ticket for Mars. So you have that here. And the corporate action is taking one of your ships, using one of these tickets, using it, and moving one of your buildings from the crater to this board. It's one of your domes, your workshops, or your laboratories, and moving it from the crater to here. So the trade-off is you no longer have it available on the main board as an option to help you with exploit the crater actions there with the worker placement there. But you do get an immediate benefit here. For domes, you get 3 credits. For workshops, you get a titanium. For the laboratories, you get a rare earth as an immediate benefit. And then you place them here. You have to start with the lowest number in the A section, the B section, or the C section. And then when you have buildings connected to these spaces here, you see they're color-coded. When you gain an astronaut of that matching color, instead of putting it in your base player board, you can place it here instead, and you get those victory points. Now it's here forever. You don't get it back but you get those victory points, which it's 5 points, which is a fair bit in this game. So, but you don't have access to it again. So that's where those trade-offs. You don't have these buildings, you don't have these astronauts, you're sending them to Mars, so they're gone. So that's the trade-off. You can also, when you use your build a solar panel action that's available in the regular game part, you can build one of these 2 Mars solar panels, and you get these benefits here, which are a combination of victory points and reputation. Here it's 1 victory point, 3 reputation, and it goes up all the way to 4 victory points, and you can build them here. When one of these is complete, all the building spots in the solar panel, you see there's more in the B sector and more in the C sector. At the end of the game, for each of these sectors that are complete, that sector will separately score, and whoever has the most in that sector gets 10 points, the second most 6, the third most 3. But if any sector is not complete, scoring does not happen for that sector. It just doesn't happen. So you have to make sure, that's where there's the risk, that sector is complete. If there's a 1 spot open and someone is not going to fill it for you, if you have the majority, they may not think it's worth the 3 points to help you get 10. So that's where there's the risk. So you got to be careful about that. And then for the goal scoring, the first level goal is just having 1 building. It could just be a dome, 1 spot in any of them. The second level scoring is having a building in 2, and the third level scoring is having a building in all 3. So that's 2 Mars. And that's all the corporations. So let's zoom on over to some final thoughts. Whew, we made it through all the corporations. Okay. I probably spent too much time on them, but I'm really digging this game, as you can tell. So my final thoughts are going to be no surprise. So I'll start with my caveats. My caveats are going to be that this game is fairly interactive. I touched on this a little bit earlier. So if you are not into interactive games, then that may be a concern here. You are definitely going to get in each other's way just naturally, even if you're not trying to be super interactive. It's just going to happen here because you're going to be trying to be more efficient, and you are just going to get in each other's ways because you're going to be going for those more affordable spots, whether it's here, whether it's lower on these tracks or whatever that is, and it's going to then prevent someone else from getting those. Moreover, someone may place an astronaut on one of these spots and you want astronauts, so you may build a building so that you can get that astronaut instead. So you may interpret that as stealing or not. That's up to you. But that is part of this game, is trying to get those astronauts from the crater back to your base. So just be aware of that. This is an interactive game, and there's area control aspects of this. And if you're playing with the 2 Mars part of it, if you're playing with the Evergreen, it's going to intensify those parts of the game. So definitely interactive game. So caveat about that. It's also a game where there's a lot of sequencing, a lot of resource management, and that can go awry just because of the level of that involved, and because there's people in front of you in turn, and so that may screw up your plan. So you've got to pivot, and you can have a strategy and plan, but you also have got to be reactive and be okay with having to switch gears and find another path forward. I like that, and I like being tactical and being like, okay, well, that didn't work out. What else can I do now? But if you want more certainty in your path and strategy, then that may also be a concern for you. So those are my warnings and why this game might not be for you. However, I don't necessarily have an issue with those things. And I am really loving this game. And I've touched on many of those reasons why, but I'll just reiterate those. I like that there are many paths in how you can approach this game. A lot of those are baked into the structure of what's going on. You can focus on different efficiencies, and those are baked into the structure of the bases that you have in front of you. You can focus on efficiencies of, I'm going to focus on funding, so I'm going to make that more efficient for me, and I'll make it cheaper, and then I'll get these cards, and then I'll be more efficient. So that could be one strategy that you could pursue. You could focus on, these actions and making those more efficient. You could focus on, building and exploiting the crater more. I think there's so many different paths just kind of in the base aspects of the game. And then you throw in the fact that the corporations are going to get mixed up every time and how those options are going to change and what cards you might get. Just the variety of options, the fact that there's the asymmetric powers. I am so excited. Every time I've played, it's felt like a different energy and vibe. But that being said, this is one of the things that I've loved about several games I've been super excited about recently, like Endeavor Deep Sea, which I had kind of set aside for a while, but I've played recently and have been really digging again. How to Save a World. And now this, where the kind of base rule set is fairly accessible, and even the rules for these corporations, all of them are fairly straightforward. But the options and how they all fit together and the paths and different things you can do is where the complexity comes. And I think that's great. The teach for this game is not going to be super complex. However, when you're sitting there and you're figuring out, how am I going to do all the things I want to do, that's where you're going to be sitting there in AP crazy land, because you only have 2 turns left and you need to eke out just a little bit more, and you know that there's a path and you're going to figure it out. And that's the kind of game this is. And I love that. And I've been very pleased with gaming love and happiness this year. I got SETI last year, but I haven't really broken into it until this year, and I've been really loving that. But that is a harder teach. It's more intense. So I think it's going to get to the table probably a little less than this. This maybe is a little bit more accessible, but it has kind of a strategic depth that feels maybe similar in terms of the intensity of options that are available. So, and also this one just, it has the worker placement, the resource management, has card play, engine building, is just hitting a lot of my buttons. So, it feels like it's a game built for me, and all the little astronauts everywhere, the little figures, it has the cuteness factor. The corporation, it has kind of the throwback design. It has a unique artistic style, which I really am digging. So I'm definitely here for this. It has me flying high. It's launching me into the stratosphere. I should probably stop while I'm ahead or behind. I don't know. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It's super appreciated. It means a lot to me. And thank you for being here. And just remember, the only rule is that there are no rules, except in board games.